And first of all, let me introduce myself a little bit. I know most of you probably do not really join the previous seminar, so you probably don't really know much about me. My name is David Penn, and I am the director at Youth Innovation Lab, and I host Youth uh, Coding and Innovation Club at Central Island. Um, so I am a full-time engineer or work for a couple of big and small company for more than 20 years. So I have a lot of experience in different fields, mostly on the IT field. And this seminar, when I discuss with Levittown Public Library, um, at first, I think it should be an introduction just for Python. Then I collect some feedback and I get some pretty good feedback from different parents. And one of the common question or say issue is that um, a lot of kids start programming using Scratch like this one. Okay, if I open one, you probably see that, yeah, this is a Scratch. So a lot of kids start the programming um, from the scratch. This is the first programming tool or say language, whatever they're learning. And after a couple of years, they probably start like age of 6, 7, or 8. After a couple of years, when they move on to the middle school or sometimes even to the high school, a lot of parents find this trap over here. That means their kids are pretty comfortable to program using this Scratch environment. But unfortunately, they do not really like to move on. Say they do not really like to learn some other language, or say more advanced language. For example, Python or Java, let alone the C, C++, that's more advanced. So that's one of the common questions the parents in my club, also the parents I discuss with even my friends, they ask me, say, David, you are really in this field. I mean, in my spare time, I talk and I teach class, and I also have host the event. I bring up the kids to different STEAM education event or competition, so they know I am really have a lot of experience. I also deal with a lot of kids from age as young as 5, as old as 20. So they know I have a lot of experience with different group of kids. So how to deal with this group of kids? They really like the Scratch programming and they feel pretty comfortable about that. They even advanced in this programming, but they are hesitate to move on to learning something more advanced. So how can we solve this problem? That's really one of the motivation. I say maybe I should change my subject a little bit. Instead of just introduce the Python to the beginner, I will discuss a little bit more about the relationship between the Scratch or some other block-based language like Blockly. If you use the Blockly as a programming tool, it's perfectly fine. It's very similar as a Scratch. How to move from this to some language like this? So how can you code like Python instead of code like Scratch? And how can you do the smooth transaction between transition from the beginner level to this intermediate level? So that's what the topic I want to bring on in this presentation, and I hope you can find some of this stuff pretty interesting. And in the end, I hope you will say, geez, oh, I figure out that it's not really so challenging to move from Scratch to Python. Just need a little bit more uh, practice. Also change your mindset a little bit. Okay, so that's our subject. We will discuss about Python, of course, but we will focus on how to let the kids smoothly transfer from the Scratch into Python. So that's really what we are focused on. Okay, so before we start everything, I would like to bring up this. This is really something at I think a couple of months ago, the IEEE Spectrum, they have the most popular programming language for this year. The number one is Python, and of course they have a whole list. They have the C. Surprisingly, C is number two. A lot of hardware and also Internet of Things, and this kind of company still use C. Java is number three, and C++, C Sharp, R. Not many people know R, but R is one of the programming language focused on the data processing. And JavaScript, PHP. PHP, if you don't really know PHP, you probably heard the WordPress. The WordPress and a lot of very popular platform was really totally based on the PHP. And Go is a pretty new language, but they are really move on and attract a lot of people to learn. Swipe, it's really for the iOS platform. So that's really, I want to say Python is one of the very popular language. Also, it's a very demanding language. So that means they have a lot of company looking for the Python developer. Okay, so let's see who is use Python. And of course, I just name a few: Yahoo, Google, and NASA, YouTube is part of the Google service. And you probably see the Discovery and also IBM, Red Hat, a lot of companies. I just name a few. So what the Python is good for? So why there are so many people talking about Python? So you probably heard a lot of institute or your teacher, your friend, if your parents discuss with anybody, say, oh, my kids is move on, for example, to ninth grade. They have the AP computer science in school. They are teaching Java. So before that, do we need to prepare for anything? A lot of times they probably will tell you, say, oh, Python is a pretty good beginner language, and it's really good for the kids who is pretty mature. So that means if they are really reached a certain age, like 13 or older, they are perfect fine to learn Python. If they're younger, in general, we do not really want them to pick Python as a first language to learn. The obvious reason is that Python is not a graphic based. It also it's not block based. So it's kind of boring to start with Python, but it's perfect fun if you already reach like the high school age. Without learning anything about Scratch, you can directly learn Python without any problem. Okay, and so how good is Python? Of course, it's really super powerful. That's why YouTube choose that. That's why NASA chooses for their encryption algorithm. And Google, of course, uses it for a lot of different web search platform. Netflix also built that in their software infrastructure. In Dropbox, it's really have the server and client both primary in Python. Raspberry Pi is another very popular hardware. They also support Python. So what I can do with Python? Of course, Python is a very generic language. In terms of generic, which means they can use for different purpose, or we call it multi-purpose. Some language, especially some of this language back to 30, 40 years ago, like Fortran, they are pretty dedicated for certain area. Even now, like the R, they're mostly focused on the data processing. But Python, when it was invented almost 20 years ago, it's really start to invent as a generic purpose language. So that means they try to be as generic as possible, just like Java. They do not really say, oh, this language will have serious performance issue. Or this language really have a lot of issue on data processing. they do not really, at least they don't really design like that. So you can start the Python for the GUI application. The GUI here means the graphic user-based interface. So anytime you see any of this application have something like this, like the user interface, you can choose from different tab, or you can choose from different menu. That's GUI. And if you don't really know what's the difference between GUI, you can compare to this. So if I give something like this is not GUI. This is text-based. So this is a command terminal. So most of this program, especially the advanced program, they do not really want only create something like this. So obviously you do not really able to find it's easy to use. Sometimes it's a little bit confused. You have to find what's a configuration, what's the option you have to choose. And inside the GUI, you pretty much choose by different icon or different menu. So that's why the GUI application is very, very popular. Also, it's very, very important. Also, it can be used to create the website. So if you pay attention to that, this is a URL, right? So this is really a website. So do this, even Google, right? So search engine, this is a website. But you can use Python to create website. Two of the most popular Python framework to build the website. One is called the Flask. I just quickly give you some of this basic idea. I don't really give you too much details. So the Flask is really something called the micro web framework was written in Python, and it was support Python. So it's very, very popular. And they have a couple of more, and Flask is only one of the example. And they can also use to scrape the data from the website. I do not really give you too much detail about what's a scrape, but I try to show you something like if you happens to have interesting about how to check out the stock market, you probably heard something like the trade view. Okay, let me see, trading view. Okay, something like this. Okay, so when you use this website, you continually have to say, oh, I have to find the Apple's a stock chart, and I have to find its price, and I have to find how the analysts they have the information about this stock. But sometimes I just cannot really constantly watch this. That's almost impossible, right? So for example, I want to trade stock. I have interest about this Apple stock. How can I do the automatic trading? Of course, you can use the platform from the different trading account, but sometimes you just want to collect the information. Say, I want to collect the information, and I want to send me the alert or when Apple stock is reached, for example, 150. So I know it breaks through the probably something I can consider to buy the Apple stock. So how can we do it? It's really something what we can do, use the scrape data from website. I don't really give you a lot of details. I just give you one of the typical example. So you can really get the data from this web page dynamically. You use the coding. Of course, it's not a simple coding. Using Python with the library to code and scrape the data. For example, you can constantly get the stock price, and you can get multiple stock price, for example, Apple, Tesla, Netflix, and you can even get some of this technical trend if you really have interest in. Again, I don't really spend too much time over here. I just give you a quick example. Okay, so besides the scraping of the data from the website, you can also use Python to analyze data. Some of this very useful library, something like the Panda. I'm sorry. I should not use this Panda and Python library. Okay. Okay. So if you pay attention to that, it was really support Python to process the data, and it's very, very popular. Again, this is only one of the example. So why we need to analyze the data? The same thing, if you have huge amount of data, for example, you have the weather data, and you have the geology data. So you have the altitude, the longitude from different interesting point, and you want to really create your own algorithm, or you want to create just like your own history table. Sometimes you need to analyze certain events. For example, the flooding was really a serious problem at Europe, right? And the wildfire is a really important problem for the West Coast. So you like to find out the pattern between the how many raining days, and what's the wind speed, and what's the temperature, what's the humidity, all of this kind of data, what's the relationship between them, and why it will cause the different problem for different region. So when you have this kind of problem, you can always try to find the solution. And Python is one of the very good language which can use to write the data analyzing. A lot of people build the tool. You can directly use the tool, but again, it's always possible to build something very dedicated for your own project. Besides this, Python is also very good for writing the script for system administration. I know for a lot of beginner, especially someone do not really in the IT field, system administration probably it's not really something you really know how to. But I just give you a typical example. We have, for example, your school probably have more than 40 server for different purpose. Some server is for web server, some server it's really collect the data for different web camera, and some other server is really for the multi-purpose. For example, they have the big LED, they want to keep track of how to refresh that and how to make sure that they are really post the right message, something like that. So the system administration job is really try to say, okay, we build some tool, or we build a lot of like the task, which we can constantly monitor how this application working, and we can constantly collect the data. Of course, when they collect data, they can send back so that you can analyze the data. So that's how the system administration works. It's pretty much just like the schools or the libraries administration desk. They are doing their job to provide the fundamental service over there. And Python can write the script to support this, and they can build very elegant and very powerful script. And like the AWS, if you know a little bit, they can support the Python-based Lambda to just support all kind of system admin task. Okay, in the end, not really the end of this list. I just give you 6, but the list is on and on, so you can probably get much more than this. But one of the very interesting field is the game develop. I'm not really a huge fan for the game, but I have played a couple of games before, like Call of Duty, and of course, Call of Duty is not really created by Python, but I can show you some game, especially the smaller game, created by Python. And Python also have its own third-party game engine, so they are really capable to develop the game using Python. Okay, so let's move on, and this is pretty much give you a little bit more about the inside of the Python's different library or different framework, like the web development. Besides Flask, another one is Django, and this is very, very popular. And also for the testing, they have Scenarium. For the web scraping, they have a lot of tools. I just name a few, Scrap It or something like that. For the data analysis, again, this is Panda, right? And we also have the Seaborn and a lot of different libraries support data analysis. For the graphics, of course, well, very popular is Turtle. I will show you how it looks like. If I'm running this, you probably see this small turtle. This is really something called Turtle. Okay. And for machine learning, they have this Skyline, something like that. I just name a few. For big data, they have a whole package um, from Hadoop to a lot of other library, which was written using Python. For Internet of Things, of course, they have a totally different field that collect different data from different sensor and in real time. So I don't really discuss too much about this advanced topic just because they are not really for beginner, at least not really at this moment. Okay, so whenever we are talking about anything new, we always try to find out its history, right? So the history about Python is pretty interesting. It was a generic purpose programming language, but it's also object-oriented language. Of course, for beginner, you probably don't really know or don't really care what's object-oriented language. It's really referred to something like consider everything as an object. So for example, if you see a car, you break down that car into the wheel, the roof, and the mirror, and the hood, and everything, just piece by piece. Each one is object, and put together is another object. So I just give you a very simple and straightforward example. It was created by this, I believe, he's a Lesland, and the Guder van Rossum, and it was a interpret language. Interpret language, again, it's a concept for how the programming language can be run. Most of this programming language, I only refer to advanced programming language, was divided into the interpret or compiled language. So interpret means you have to use the command line to run it, start with Python, something like this. Of course, this will not work because I don't really have this coding here, Python and io.py, something like this. Of course, I don't really have io.py here, but this means you are using Python and io.py. So that really make it to become the interpret language. Java is the same thing, but some other language like C, C++, they are not. So they can build the program language, which you can direct click the icon or something like that. You can start run. So you do not have to use the command lines kind of stuff. So one very good question my student used to ask me, say, if it's really an interpret language, why it's going to be so popular? Again, even it is an interpret language, you can still wrap it, use different kind of tool. So they can really self-contained and they can running as an individual application. So you do not really have to worry too much about that. The whole point about interpret language is try to make it cross-platform compatible. So that means include the Windows platform, Mac OS, and also a lot of other platforms like Linux. They try to support them across the platform. So that's why it's so important. So do Java, it's the same thing. It's not really because they try to do that, it's because they figure out the whole world was divided by different operating system. So Windows have its own operating system and Mac OS have, Linux have it. How can I create a language to be supported on all of this platform? That's how this was become so popular. So again, I don't really give you too much details. Just you understand that this do not really means it's not advanced. It's still very advanced. Okay, so now we spend about 20, 23, 24 minutes talking about what is Python. Again, I don't really, from this slide, I don't really give you anything about how to write the Python code, right? Even we are talking about this is the Python for beginner seminar, but I really want to focus on is how can I give my kids the chance to move from the scratch, whether he really loves scratch or he just started scratch, or even he don't really start scratch yet. Just in case he starts scratch, really like it, how can he move from scratch to Python? If he really like it, after a couple of years, he still don't really able to move out from scratch. He don't really like other programming language. He really is so much interesting about Scratch. So how can I do it? That's how our seminar will focus on. We can really do it. So before we jump from Scratch to Python, I give you a couple of lists, and so you can understand what's fundamentally different between Scratch and Python. Of course, the Python is a general purpose object-oriented language, but Scratch it's limited for very beginner. So that means even you find the Scratch is very popular and very powerful in certain terms, especially the graphic and multimedia part, but it's still very limited for its purpose. For example, you cannot try running any of this Scratch as a standalone application. At least it's not easy, right? And you have to rely on the online platform. Of course, they used to have the offline platform, but you have to rely on a whole, we call the IDE, to run this program. You cannot say, okay, I just want to run this one, and without this, no, that's impossible. You have to host it as a whole so you can run it. Of course, they do not really support OOP, the object-oriented programming. Even you don't really care, but that's something very, very important. Python works on almost all the platform. So from the operating system to micro operating system. Something like the micro operating system means, I'm sorry, it's really not a full-fledged operating system. It's really a mini version. So for example, if you have a iWatch, they do have the iOS, but they don't really have the full stem of the iOS. And so do something like the Raspberry Pi. They have the Linux, but their Linux version is a minimized version. A lot of times you have to use the micro OS. It's because, especially for some sensor and some of this very small and tiny device, you do not really have enough memory and CPU power to power the full-fledged operating system. So Python is very good. They are designed to be support the big, like the Windows, Mac, Linux, to the very small, tiny, minimized operating system. But unfortunately, Scratch only support online. Of course, they have limited support on OS. I do not really think Scratch can really support on a lot of micro OS. So that means if you want to put the Scratch on a tiny device, a lot of times it's impossible. Again, Python extends its support on tons of hardware and data science. So it's really reached out for a lot of different platforms. It was supported and used by a lot of different fields. And Scratch, you probably never heard you use Scratch for data science. You probably don't see the Scratch used for the IoT, Internet of Things. Scratch have limited support for the artificial intelligence, but it's mostly on the user part. It's not really on the algorithm or on the fundamental solution part. So Scratch by itself, it's not a solution for a lot of this advanced hardware and advanced like the artificial intelligence. It's because it was not designed for this purpose, right? So you cannot blame, say, why MIT don't really create the Scratch to support all of this. That defeats the purpose. The purpose is easy to learn and easy to really understand. For beginner, it's a great language. And But I want to really focus on is that learning Python for Scratch coder. So anybody uses Scratch to code any project, if you already know that, it's not so hard. You just need to make the translate or something like you need to understand a little bit of know-how. Okay, let's move on about the difference between the Scratch and Python. Of course, I just give you the summary list of that. I don't really give you the whole detail. That's almost impossible because we only have 1.5 hour here. So in Scratch, each sprite have its own code. For example, we have 3 fish here, right? So we have 1, 2, 3 fish. Each fish have its own code. See, this fish have the code here, and if I click this fish, I'm sorry, yeah, it has a code here, and this is another fish. It has its own code, and sprite interact with each through the shared resource, such as variable, message, and okay, sorry, this missed M, maintainable. And if you want to create the variable, you will really create something through here. So you can create a variable here. And you can use variable to send them and receive message across different sprite. And this often become a little bit confusing, and it will lead to pretty maintainable code. I do not really tell you, say, oh, this didn't work, or this is really make it looks ugly. No, no, no. Scratch is a great language, but if you know any of this advanced language, you will understand the Scratch, its limitation. It's really very hard to build some of this more specific or say more advanced coding or project. But in Python, each line of the code, I just quickly compare here. So this is Python code. It's written by Python, and it will be read by interpreter. So it's pretty much like this. The Python start from here, right? Python, if they use this code, they will read the first line, say, oh, I want to import the turtle, this library. I want to set its shape as turtle. I want to set its speed at 10, and I want to make it pan up, so on and on. Okay, so it's really read the code line by line, and it will execute this instruction directly in sequential order. Of course, here I just give you a rough idea because they also support the asynchronous. So that's more advanced. I don't really try to confuse you, but it's in general start from the beginning to the end. Of course, they will skip some of this, but that's how the Python program is running. Of course, most of this Scratch coder, they probably know that you can start from here, right? So you can, sorry, let me see if I started this. Okay, so you can start here. Oh, this will detect the emotion, detect the motion. That's why it didn't work. Let me bring up another different. Okay, so this probably is better. Project. Okay, so if I start here, okay, so I can use this, right? Okay, so this is pretty cool. This is a great Scratch language. And they build the goalie, and they have the football, and kick the penalty kick, and try to control by different keyboard key. Okay, but you can see here they have multiple sprites, and each one have its own code, and this one don't have the code. Yeah, surprise. But anyway, so they probably forgot to put the code here. But they have the glove, which is the defense as goalie, and they have the soccer here, try to kick the soccer. And so you can see they have the code separately, right? But they also can communicate. And if you see here, they have the score, they have the timer. The timer is built in, but the score is really something you can use to keep track of how many goals you get. Okay. And if you move on and want to see the difference, you probably will find more difference. So in Scratch, each block is read in sequential order. So that means they are read from the beginning to the end. This part pretty much is the same as the Python, right? And the code start with any event or head block. You can start it. So that means you can start with click the flag. You can start, say, you press the space bar, or you can start, say, you click certain sprite. And you can also say you change the backdrop when you changed, or say when loudly, when you speak very loud, they can detect that. You can start that. So there are really something called you can start with event. Okay, so that's all kind of event, and you can put the code in this block, and each sprite have its own block, of course. In Python, each line is read line by line from top to bottom, just like here, from top to bottom, and they will evaluate each statement, and in turn they will assign the value and returning the value. I just quickly go through this. Again, you do not have to worry about if you don't really understand what's going on here. I will give you more details about how to compare the Scratch to Python. Okay, one of the challenge topic in Scratch, especially for the very beginner, is the variable. So a lot of times they will think, what's the variable? And why we need to understand the variable? Why we need to use the variable? So the variable, if you're thinking about that, it's nothing more than some sort of the container which can save the data. And inside that container, that data can be changed. For example, you have the age, right? So this year, your age probably is 10. Then next year, the same variable, age, will become 11, right? And then the year of next year, your age become 12. So if you use age as variable, that variable can be changed. Of course, it's not very often, but something like this, like the score, you can change. Let me see if I can. Sorry. Okay, so you can see here, right? The score becomes 3 because they have 3 ball was kicked inside the net. So this is a variable. It's initial as 0 and then become 1 if it's past the goalie and go inside, and become 2, try it again, becomes 3, the succeed again. So that's a variable. Of course, in Scratch, you will create the variable from here. So you can say, I will make a variable. You can give them any variable, something like, okay, loudness. Loudness is not a very good one. Let's say score tips, okay. Something like this. So you can see the tips is here. Of course, you can use these tips, and maybe you can give them the try of how to pass this goalie. Okay, so you can create a variable, and you can change the variable. Say you can set the variable, you can change the variable. But in Python, of course, you don't use the block. So you have something like this. You have a variable name, and then you can change the variable. So this means you are 10 here, 10 plus 1 become 11. So this variable becomes 11. And if you want to reset it, you say, okay, I want this variable to reset back to 0. That's perfectly fine. Okay, so you can compare side by side. This side is Scratch, this side is Python. You can change variable in Scratch, you can change variable in Python. You can set variable in Scratch, you can set variable in Python, right? It's not so hard, easy, right? Let's move on. So how to translate the arithmetic, this kind of block from Scratch to Python? Again, not super hard. We go over here. If you see the first 4, of course, include the random. They are really sort of the block which was created to make the calculation. So for example, you have two number, you have 10 and you have 3. So 10 plus 3 becomes 13. 10 minus 3 becomes 7. 10 times 3 becomes 21. 10 divided by 3, if you don't really get any of this decimal, so you only get 3, and you have mod. Okay, so round, same thing. So all of this is pretty straightforward. If you are fourth grade or fifth grade or above, you can understand all of this. I mean, the first 4 probably you only need second grade level to understand that. The last 2 is a little bit challenging, but again, I'm not here to teach you math. And in Python, you have the module you can use. So for example, you have 2 number here, 10 and 3. You can use 10 plus 3. Again, it's pretty similar, right? 10 plus 3, this 10 plus 3. Again, 10 minus 3, 10 times 3, and 10 divided by 3. And it's mod, and this round, okay. So that's almost like one-to-one map. So you will not really get confused. Of course, that's really very, very easy to translate. So if you write anything like here, you can direct write over here, period, very easy. Okay, so let's move on to another one, something about operator. Yeah, this is really part of here. If you see here, you have compare to smaller than or equal to or larger than, and you have this and, or, and not. These are really something used to compare. This is something called logic. Again, logic is not really something I try to teach you here, but you can thinking about logic is that you have true or false. If you have both this to be true, this AND will become true. If you have any one of this to be true, this OR will become true. So that means OR, it's least restrict. The only lead one is true. For example, if your dad or your mom is in home, you can start watch TV. So you do not really have to have both parents to stay in home and you can watch TV, right? So that's OR. And another example for the AND is that if your dad is in home and your mom is in home, you can start to play video game. Okay, so that's more restrict. So in case your dad is not in home yet, you cannot start play video game. So it's a little bit harsh, right? So you can see what's the difference between AND and OR. OR is least restrict. AND is far more restrict. They lead both to be true. So this is very simple. If you have 2 boys and one is 7 years old, another is 9 years old. So compare the age. The first boy is younger than the second boy, right? So 7 is not equal to 9. Of course, this will not become true. And 7 larger than 9, that's incorrect. So it's false. So this is compare. The first 3 block is compare. The last 3 block is really about the logic. Not, it's really reverse. So if you are false here, the not false become true. If you are true here, the not true become false. So for example, are you 10 years old? If you are not 10 years old, so that's become false, right? So if you are not 10 years old, that becomes the true. So that means you're only 7 years old. So you are not 10 years old. You are true. Okay. Again, this is about logic. A little bit confused, but I'm not really here to teach you all of this logic, but I just try to give you the example about how to translate from the scratch into the Python. It's not very challenging. You can see here, almost one-to-one mapping, right? Okay, so let's move on. We have something like conditional. So let's go to control, and you can see this if then else. I'm sorry, this screen it's a little bit small, so I make it bigger, so you can see it's clear. Okay, so if you see this, if then, else, and wait until repeat, or repeat until, all of this are really called conditional. The conditional, it's about logic again. So if you don't really fully understand what's a conditional, I give you some typical example. For example, if your dad is in home, you have to start to maybe read some book. Otherwise, you probably can play a little bit of your game. Okay, I don't know, just make it up. And so this is if your dad is in home. So if this is true, you have to do something, read book. Otherwise, you probably can play a little bit game. But you compare to this one, if your dad is in home, you will read book, but they do not have earth. So that means they don't really know what will happen if your dad is not in home. So that part is open. So they are not really give you this part. So again, this part is really the the Python. Oh, sorry. This part is about the scratch. If you see here, you see the scratch. If touched the goalie, they will do something. Otherwise, if it's touched the color, they will do something, right? So it's really the if else, and inside if else, this have the if, they have no else, right? Okay. And in Python language, again, it's very easy to understand. If this, then do something here, this part. Else, they are doing something else here. So do this. If this is true, they are doing something. So pretty straightforward, right? Okay. About loop. Loop is something really we use a lot, especially if you are really write some of this Scratch program. A lot of times you probably use forever loop for, I don't know, half of the project use the forever loop. It's just because this is pretty straightforward and easy to understand. So forever loop means you never end, you don't really stop. And repeat 10 means you repeat 10 times, right? And wait until, so that means until some condition become true, you'll wait over there. Stop all, so you do not do anything, stop everything. Stop all will really stop all of this sprite. And repeat until, it's again, they will repeat until something happens. For Python, you really have something very similar. So this one repeat 10, so you will say, for I in range 10, you do not really see range from 1 to 10. So that's really, by default, it's from 0 to 10. Okay, so you will do something just like this. And while it's true, you will do something. So you will say, while it's true, it's forever loop. Why we say we don't really use forever? Because Python don't really have any keyword like forever. They do not use that. If it's true, they will do it. So this true will never change. So that means they will never end. So this while loop will do it forever. But this is different. While not condition, wait until this condition becomes true, you will do something. Stop all, you can use exit. So in Python, you can exit from there. Repeat until, you can use something like repeat until the condition is true, you are doing something. So these two are different. A lot of times some beginner confuse between them. So this means you do not really do anything until this happens. This means you are constantly doing something until something happens. So the condition for this happen means terminal of this. The condition for this means start this. So that's fundamentally different. Okay. So again, let's move on. Random number. Random number is something we use a lot, especially we do not really want to hard code something. We want to use a random number. So you are here, You can pick up a random from 1 to 10, or you can pick up random from 1 to 100. That's perfect fine. You can change it. And in Python, you have to import a random library. Again, the library is something which it's not really bundled with the interpret tool by itself. So that means without import this library, you do not really able to understand what this random is. So you can think the library is like the extension. So you see here, you have the Scratch extension, right? So you click this add extension. You can add all kind of extension. They have the music, they have the pen, they have the video sensor, text to speech, you have translator, you have a couple of hardware support, right? So this is really extension. In Python, they do not really call that extension. They call it library. So that's really say, okay, I do not support it in Python directly, but you can really import from another different library. Of course, you have to install that library first. So you have to import this random library, and then they can generate a random number between 1 to 10 and save it. This part is pretty much back to this first. This becomes a variable, right? So if you see here, the random number is a variable. You can change it. Okay. So how about the list? I know for the very beginner, especially if you just code the Scratch, you probably never really use list, but list is something very useful. So if you go to here, you can make a list here. So I just give you a quick example. So if you want, say, players, okay, so you can create a players as a list. So now it's empty. You can really add the players into this list. Again, you do not really have to use this. I just did disable it here. So the list, it really means something like a big container that have multiple objects inside that container. For example, you have the list of players. So you have the first player, second player, third player, all inside this container that become a list. And for list, you have this, you can choose. You can add something into the list. For example, I add Tom as a player. Then I add Sarah as a player. You can delete from the list, delete from the position. You can delete all. And you can insert something at certain position in the player list. You can replace the item. You can also get the item from the list. So the list is very popular and very powerful structure. Of course, for beginner, you probably don't reuse much. For Python, list with its own syntax like this. So you have break, and then you define an empty list. You can use list append. You can append something into the list. You can delete the list at certain position. You can really insert the list at certain position, and you can replace the list element at certain position with this thing. And of course, you can get its element from the list. Since this is a little bit more advanced, I do not really spend too much time over here. In case you already understand the list and you know how to use it in Scratch, you probably will find it's not really that hard to understand this part. Of course, if you do not really understand the list, do not panic. It's not really something you will learn at the day one. Over the time, you will practice and learn something, then you will understand, oh, the list maybe it's very tricky, but it's very useful. And again, in Python, besides list, they have a lot of structure. That structure is very advanced, far more than just list. But compared to Python, the Scratch don't really give you much of other choice. Okay, this it gives you a little bit further detail about the list. You can check the length of the list, use the length. In Python, you use the length. This is some sort of function. And you can check whether the list contains something. You can check the things in list in Python. Of course, they have some other more advanced method in Python, something like you can reverse, you can sort, and that's all about the advanced part. Okay, I'm talking a little bit about the external library. So you can see in Scratch, it's really called the extension. So you have all kind of extension, right? And in general, I really like the Penn, music, video sensing sometimes, text to speech. If you have chance to try, translate, it's very, very cool. Some of this hardware, I don't really try much, but I believe it can be a very fun project. So if you choose, for example, you choose a Penn, so they installed this, all of this block from this extension. So do here, you have Python, you have all kind of library. You probably don't really know any one of this, but you heard I mentioned the pandas and NumPy, Skylearn and PyTorch and scraping, this for scrape, and TensorFlow and Keras and Sarah. So this is all about the different library which you can really import. So the Python program can really write to support more advanced feature. So let's do a quick quiz. How many of you have Python or have the Scratch coding experience? You can put in the chat if you don't feel comfortable to speak out. Okay. Let me see. I have the chat here. Me, cool, very good. Okay, so yeah, we see a couple of kids have the Scratch programming experience. So you probably understand what I'm talking about, the Scratch part, right? And you start to move on, try to learn how to become a Python program. You already have some basic idea about how to code in Scratch. And it's that really challenge to code in Python. Now we'll move on to give you some hand-on. You will find it's not really so challenging. Before we really doing that, I want to show you a couple of platform which can do the block for text platform. This really the idea about, okay, I want to code, but I still feel more comfortable about block. So they really have some platform like the edu block. They can really use this block to code it. But again, I'm not really here to teach this platform, and I'm not really expert in this platform as well. But this is not hard. You can try it out. If you go to Google, you probably find the edu block. Okay, so you go to edublocks.org and you can start creating, and you can create it. Okay, Python 3. Okay, so you can create your code just like drag and drop, something like this. Score, for example. Okay, so you can doing something like this. But again, I'm not here to teach you how to code like this, because eventually you like to code like a real Python programmer, right? So that's why I really suggest another one is Twinkit. Twinkit is a huge platform which support a lot of programming language. You can host that online. So your code can really host online. You do not have to save the code on your own local disk. But beyond that, you can really try to learn something, how to translate from the block language into the Python code, like the text-based code. Okay, so I just quickly show you something like this. So you can see on the left side, it's really the block, right? So you can see the shape, speed, all of these are block. And I click the run, so you can see how it's running. And then I can show you the code here. So the code here and this is really one-to-one mapping. So I quickly give you the idea how it is. So the first one is say, okay, input turtle. So if you use the block, you will say shape is turtle. Of course, you don't really have to see anything called the import turtle. It's because this was built in, so you don't really have the import part. But the first part is shape of turtle. So you can see here, shape is turtle. And the speed, the turtle speed is 10. The pen is up. And then you set X to be 25, right? One-to-one mapping, pretty cool. And then the rest of that, it's a little bit complex. So for each item I in the list, blah, blah, this, you will go to this. Okay, so you probably start to feel panic, a little bit confused. So don't worry about that. I will start with a very simple example first. So let's go to the first example, drag and drop order. Okay. And this one is the drag and drop order. Okay, so this is really the very first example. This one very easy to understand. So you can see they are really draw a ball and then they move the turtle down over here. And when you check its code, you can see they have import two library. The first one is turtle. Again, of course, you don't really understand what's a turtle. The turtle is a library which have its own purpose to support the graphics. It's a basic graphics for Python. So it's really a library. The name is coming from its default icon. It's pretty much like a turtle, right? So you can see the import turtle, they have the import random. Again, you don't really know why they want to use random. Import this one, we will see that later. And you can see the shape turtle is shape is turtle. We can change this part. I will show you. And the speed is 10 here. And you can set its color to be random color. So you can see here, that's why you want to import this library. Without this import, you cannot use random. So you pick up a random between 0 to this big number because they can support a lot of color, right? So you can randomly select a color and you can begin to fill. So this is begin fill and you create a circle here and then you have the end fill and you have pen up. So this turtle is pen up and the color become black. So this is referred to the black color and then go to certain position. So that's how you see here. They are really trying to say, I have a turtle, its speed is 10, and I set its color, it's a random color. Then I begin to fill a circle. So this turtle is running around here, they fill a circle, and with the color was filled, and circles radius is 10. And then with pen up, so you do not receive my mark. And then you can go over here and see, set the color to be black and go to this position. This position is 0 and negative 80. So that's how it works. So all what I show you here missed one thing very important. If you are only the beginner, you do not really know anything about this. How can you translate from your code in Scratch? That's where we are coming from. So let me going back to the sample here. we have, of course, I create this before the seminar, so it will save us a little bit time. So I load it first. The very first is that you need to pen and create a turtle, right? So again, I already create here. It looks ugly, but I'm not really good on that, so just bear in mind. So okay, so this is a turtle, and of course you can create different costume. I don't have time, so I just create one, and I have this sprite. So this is a turtle, and then I want to code it. They will pick up a random color effect. They will repeat 60 times. Every time they are turning 3 degrees, and then it's paying up. Of course, all I explained here, you probably feel boring. Why I need to read this code? Let's run it. Okay, so you probably see it, right? And if you see that, you don't really have much of the feeling because it's running and then they are really moved to somewhere. But if I change code a little bit, you probably see it clearly. Okay. So I move this down, and I use my pen down. Okay, then I run it again. I'm sorry. This was inside here. Go to this position. The basic idea is that they are really repeat 60 times. Every time they are really 3 degrees. So that become what? That become draw a circle, right? So let me move this up a little bit, see if it will doing a better job here. Okay, I know what. Yeah, because they are really set a color which is you are not able to see this as a circle. So they really try to draw a circle first, and then they change the color effect to be 0, and then move to this position. And this position is really at 0 at negative 80. So this is pretty much the same as what we are doing here. Instead, this code is really in Scratch, and this code is really in Python. I mean, this part code, and you do not really able to. In general, you don't really able to do anything like this. This is pretty much for you to learn, but you can find it's pretty easy to understand, right? Okay, so this is a very simple and straightforward. Let's change it a little bit. So say, I don't really want to draw a turtle and I want to draw a triangle. That's fine. I want to, instead of pen up, I want pen down. So how about that? Let's run it again. See, this is a triangle. There leave a mark over here. If you see the code, you can see the shape become triangle, right? And then you can see the pen up become pen down. So that's something you have changed, and it's one-to-one mapping, and you can pretty easy to understand from this part over this part. But if you compare this from here all the way to here, you will not really feel too awkward. Okay, so let's move to the second demo. We'll build a for loop. That's pretty much what we are trying to demonstrate. So this for loop, okay, I think this one. Sorry, this one. Okay, so I run it first again. So they have draw 3 different circle and shift to left with different color, and then the really write some word and move the turtle down. So we know how this action looks like, and see how it may able to work in our turtle code. Okay, so we set inside here, and again, this will be kind of tricky. I don't really finish this project. In case you really have interesting, you can finish this. The whole idea is try to mimic the similar stuff here. Say, okay, you input the turtle, so you can draw the turtle or you can draw a triangle or whatever. They have couple of choice. It's built in. So you have the shape as turtle, you have the speed as 10. The speed means how fast the turtle can move. You put the pen up, so when you pen up, you don't leave the mark. And you have the x, this is a variable. So it's set its initial as 25, and you have the whole list. There are 3 different colors. So they are really referred to 3 different colors: red, blue, and yellow. And one by one, so the first color is red, and you go to a certain position, and you begin to draw a circle. You leave the pen down so you can see how the circle looks like, right? So, and then you are pen up. Why you are pen up is because you do not want the red color to be seen when they are moved over to the blue color. And then you can change the x to be minus 25. So that means on x level, they are really from this point over to left again, right? So that's why it's minus 25. And then in the end, they will go to this position. So this is really this position. They will use different color to write something like let's learn to coding. Okay, of course they have a couple of other parameters. You don't have to worry about that. In the last step is that they go to this. And if you can see this, they are really left no mark because they pen up. So you don't really see any mark over there. Okay. So that's how this coding was. And again, you can pretty much feel that it's not so challenging, right? So you have one-to-one mapping, you have set color I, you have go to X position to this, you have begin to fill, you have pen down, you have draw the circle, you have end the fill, and you go to this position, and then you set up different color. This time is black, and you can write different word. Okay, so if you want to code, of course, again, this is not really the Python coding, but I want to help you to understand how easy to understand this coding part. You want to change this, so you can change this to be classic. That's fine. And you want to change this speed? Maybe not. And you want put the pen up? Still keep the pen up. Set X to be 25. Maybe that's true. How about 50? Okay, so we set this to be 50. And we have 3 different color. And each color you can choose. This time I put something slightly more dark. And this a little bit bright. And this, don't choose white color because you don't really see the white inside the white background. Okay, gray color. Okay, something like this. And then here, I have, instead of draw a circle like 50, I draw a circle at 80. How about bigger? And then you minus the position in 25. That's fine. Probably we can do it. Okay, so we want to change this color of this text. Let's change it to be something a little bit bright. Okay, and say, let's learn code in Python. Okay, how about that? And font size slightly bigger, 18. Okay. Now let's run it again. See? Okay. This time, of course, unfortunately, they're cut off on this side a little bit, so you don't really see all this text. But this is pretty much what we just changed. We changed the color here, and we changed the X, so we know we will draw something slight, and we changed the circle, so we draw something slightly bigger, and we change the color of the text. Sorry, it moved too fast. And we changed this part. So we are writing different wording using different color. And of course, you probably see this. This is really referred to the classic. So this is really this shape. So that's really so easy to understand, right? But again, if you see the code change, you want to change the shape, you can change. And you want to change the size from 25 to 50, you change here. And you can change this. Of course, this part is a little bit hard to understand, but this is very common. It's called the RGB color. So the first two is R, the second two is G, and last two is B. So that's red, green, and blue. So 3 different color with a mix. And you can see all of these changes here. So this is 80. And if you change this is color has been changed. And you can see this wording has been changed. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, right? So let's move on to something over here, random circle. So let's see our random circle example. Okay, random circle is here. Let's run it first. Okay, so we go inside the code and we probably see something very similar and familiar. You have to import the turtle library, you have to import the random library, and then you can set the shape. Again, you can change it to anything you like. And you can set the speed. This time the speed is pretty fast, so it's 500. And you can set up the pen up or pen down. Pen up means you don't leave the mark. And for the height, it's really a whole list. You can see they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 items over here. So that means it will repeat 5 times. Every time they will have a random color here. So you can see here, this color is random. So that part is here. And then you go to its height and begin to fill, right? And the circle is 10, so it's pretty small. They want to create a small dot and end the fill. Then they go to one position and change its color and go to another position. Again, this is pretty straightforward. Something you can change. If I want, I can change it to be something like, I don't use circle, I use square. How about that? And then you can use a pen down. They will leave a lot of mark, so you can see that. In circle, I want to become 20. Okay, and then the last one, I don't really want to black. I want to use something a little bit more bright. Okay, so I run it again. So you can see here, everything was left here, and you can see some surprise of this connection line. So why this happen? Anybody know what's the reason they will leave this here? So you can see this connection, and even from here to here, why this will live over there? So what change we made triggers this problem, if this is a problem you think? Of course, we know this is a square, so that part is perfectly fine. And we don't really change the speed, it's okay. And if you see we are repeated one more time. Okay, and the code, of course, you can see the change the shape to the square, change the speed, change pen down, and for the height inside this list, every time the random pick up a color, they go to this height, try to fill a circle, which is bigger, is 20, right? And then change this color, go to this position. So I tried to solve the problem with you guys. So why we see all of this connection line? I don't really like this. So how can I resolve this problem? Okay, so maybe you don't really feel very comfortable about the answer you have, or maybe you already know the answer. But the truth is that it's a simple bug we create because we choose the pen down. So they leave the mark for everything. So from here, they have this color, and then they leave the mark over to the next one. after finish this, they leave the mark to here. And after finish this yellow one, they leave the mark over here, so on and so forth. So if we choose the pen up and we draw it again, see, this time we do not receive any mark over there. So that's how the really code change triggers a different behavior. So you can see the pen up, we highlight here, it's really here, right? Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Again, I don't really use a Scratch code here as example, but I want to show you how to make the triangle. Because this one, I'm sorry, I probably, this says something. Okay, triangle function. Okay, should I go to say something? Maybe triangle. Okay, so let's say triangle function. And if I want to create a triangle with the Scratch, I will create a costume for this sprite first, right? So I would say this is a turtle. Okay, I don't really name it properly, but anyway, you know what I mean. So you can really change this to be turtle. So this is really a turtle. Okay, and then you put the code over here, and I want to show you it's really about the function. And if you want to create function inside the script, you have to use my block, right? So you use a create a block, something like this. Again, I already create, so I already create this function. So you change this and you make the turn and then you move, and let's try it first. So they're really fast because I don't really have the delay over here. So I have no timer over here. So they'll really move and finish. And then if you want to run it again, they are really run it again. So every time they are really turn 60 degrees and move to one position, and then turn 120 degrees, move to another position, and then turn another 120 degrees, move to a third position. So that's how it works. And if you draw it multiple times, you will say, oh, this really looks cool, right? And the case you see it was leave the triangle is because they have the pen down. So they'll start from the pen down, then they set the color effect, and then they call this function, draw this triangle. Okay, so that's how the Scratch creates this one. And let's see how we create that in our Python code. Okay, so we create this. Let me see if, yeah, I'm sorry. It looks like it takes a little bit of time to refresh. Okay, yeah, finally it's here. So I run it first. You can see. Okay, so they really draw a triangle, right? And how it works is that in this code, so you have the import turtle part, it's the same. And then you have, this is function. You define a function. So turtle left 60 degree, forward 50, and left 120 degree, forward 50. So that's move the turtle. So again, this is one-to-one mapping, right? So you have the shape as turtle, and you have the color like this, and you call this function. This function was declared here, but you call from here. Okay, so this is pretty much one-to-one, right? So this is function, and then you call this function, and then this is function, and you call this function. So that's pretty straightforward, no magic. Oh, cool. So far, we already learned a lot of advanced concept. We know we write a project in Scratch. We can really go back to write that in Python. In Python like this, not Python like this. Okay, so that's very cool. We still have a little bit of time, so I will show you at least one more example. So this is say something. Let's say something here. Okay. And let's see if I have the say something implement here. Okay, sorry, that's a little bit, say something here. Okay, cool. Again, I start from the Scratch project first, so you can easily understand that. You can click this, say something, and they'll move. You can see this was moved. The turtle was moved. Okay, So again, this is a function, and this is really declared couple of position. So you move to XY position, you say something. You move to another position, you say something. Well, you don't really see much of this change. Is because they only change the X position or change the Y position. I'm sorry. They say the same word. So if you have a whole list of words, you can say different word. So let's see how it works in the Python code. So we run. So you go to over here, say something, move down. So we see the code. And again, you define the function, say something, say the word, and go to global. So that's a global position. You want to go to some position, you change its position. And every time you say the word, so what's a word? The word you define here, it's really here, say something. So that's how it works. And if we want, we can change this part, say something, and then say my name. And then the last is thank you. Okay, so you can repeat it. Say something, say my name, thank you. It's because you quote the same function, say with 3 times, and every time you give them different word. And you can see the code here. So quote 3 times, every time you give them different word. Okay, so that's pretty much covered all what I want to show you. And again, it's not really a typical Python class or Python presentation teach you all of this syntax about Python. Instead, I really want you to understand how the Python can be translated from the Scratch. If you are a Scratch coder, you write your Scratch code before, you will see how the Python is not really so hard. You can really try to figure out one-to-one mapping, and sometimes you even use the block to help you to understand it. Again, this is not the real Python coding. All the Python coding should be like this. So when you are really learning the Python, you do not really get this. You get this. But if you have the mapping from here over here, it's not really so hard, and it's not a challenge at all. You can find a lot of times learning Python is pretty much just another language. A lot of times you have to have your own block in your brain and then translate that into the code like this. Okay, so I have a couple of seconds to ask you guys to give me the feedback about how do you think about this presentation, and do you learn something useful, and do you think this is helpful for you? And if you want to learn the Python language, do you think this will be a good start point? If you give me some feedback like this, that would be great, appreciate. Okay, I think that's it. We wrap up, and we pretty much already know a lot of coding using Scratch, and then we move on from Scratch to Python. And Python is not so hard. Hopefully, you can start learning Python. If you are not really able to grasp all of this idea, try to go back and revisit this video and say, that's not so challenging. Let's make some small coding project first, and then move on. We can learn something more advanced.